with your Phil Steele Plus tour with some selections for you as well. A big winning week last week, and I do want to remind you, these videos are absolutely free. And also ask you to do is when you come over here, this is last week's video. Perfect once, just a perfect week. Last week as we had Montana State over Albany, a 47-21 winner. They covered by 17. Austin P plus 13 over Cal State Sacramento. They won outright and covered by 27. LSU minus 7 over Georgia. That thing covered by 20 points. And how about Clemson minus 28 over Virginia, covering by 17. Now, you can find out the complete reasoning behind those selections. Just check out the Phil Steele Plus Tour, Week 15, December 6th. Go ahead and do it, but make sure you do subscribe. Hit the bell. We'll let you know when the next video's up. I'll start having them every Friday. We were doing them Wednesday, Friday during the season. Going to just Fridays now. Give me a like, and don't forget to share it as well. I've got all this great information for you, and it's all free. If you do those things, you'll keep it free, and I'll keep pumping out the videos each and every week during the football season and even during the off season. All right, well, with that said, let's get to a couple of things for this week, and we're going to start off with the NFL selections, and start off, let's go to the homepage here. Take a look at NFL play for this week. We're going to click on NFL info, team pages. And the game we're going to look at is the New England Patriots against the Cincinnati Bengals. So let's go take a look at this matchup. And the line is 10. The Patriots are a 10-point road favorite. And naturally, you figure New England's going to win a game. They're the better team. So I got some reasoning why I think they're going to win the game by more than 10 points. First of all, we take a look at the fact that the New England Patriots are off 2 losses, as you see right here. Now, if we go back and take a look at this decade off of 2 losses. By the way, the last time they lost 3 in a row was way back in 2002. I'll get my scorebook or workbook page out here to show you this. You have to go all the way back to 2002. Way back here was the last time. They lost to San Diego, Miami, and then after their bye week, they lost to Denver. If you go through and look, 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's 6 years there, 16 years to 18, and now it's 17 years. They have not lost 3 straight games. So you got to figure there's a pretty good chance they're going to win this game. So let me click off the workbook page here and just go to this. And then I want to show you how they do when they are off of 2 losses. Now, the beautiful thing about Phil Steele Plus, color codes the wins and losses in red and green, so you can see at a glance. They lost 2 here. They win 38-7. That's by 31 points. They lost 2 here. They win by 12 over Buffalo. Didn't have a 2-loss season here. Didn't have a 2-loss season here. Here's 2 losses. They bounce back and win by 21. They beat the Chiefs only by 7 in the playoff, but they were minus 5, so they covered that game. Keep going along. No 2 losses here. No 2 losses here. No 2 losses here. And this takes you all the way back. That's a great thing about the Phil Steele Plus pages. They'll take you back to 2009. Here's 2 losses. They won by 21. And the other game this decade, they didn't have any 2 losses. So all the way back to 2010, they are off 2 losses. This happened 6 times. They are 6-0 against the spread in that situation. So you got to like that. Now, a couple other things I uncovered besides just that last week. Let's take a look at Cincinnati. Cincinnati put up 451 yards on Cleveland last week. So I got to thinking, what happens when the Bengals top 400 yards? Well, they topped 400 yards against Seattle. They lost the next week to San Francisco by 24. They topped 400 yards against the Rams. They lost the next week to Baltimore by 36. This is only the 3rd time all year they've topped 400 yards. The other 2 times they lost by 24 and 36. And if you go back and look at the Bengals so far this year, and even dating back to last year, their last 10 home games, how about 3-7 against the spread? Not much of a home edge. San Francisco blew them out. Arizona beat them. Jacksonville beat them. Baltimore beat them. They did beat the Jets here. So they did get actually a win there, but 3-7 against the spread their last 10. Now, last year, the Patriots struggled on the road. You remember that. Let's go back to 2018. Patriots lost to Jacksonville, Detroit, Tennessee. They lost 5 times on the road last year. Well, Belichick must have made that a priority because in the playoffs, they won on the road twice. And then this year, they've been winning on the road by 43. They beat Buffalo on the road, beat Washington by 26. They beat the Jets by 33. If you look at their road wins since they were 3-5 last year in the regular season, they are 7-2 straight up on the road, and their average win has been by 23 points per game. And the final thing we're going to look at here is naturally this tells you how teams do versus their opponent averages. The New England Patriots have held their opponents to 74 yards below their season average. The Bengals are averaging 313 yards per game, so that would get 239 yards. And on the flip side of the coin, the Bengals average 24 yards below what their opponents allow. Well, the Patriots only allow 265 yards per game. So if you add those two up, divide them by 4, you got 240 yards for the Bengals. You got to think Cincinnati is going to be able to cover here. We're going to take the New England Patriots, -10 over Cincinnati as your NFL play. Well, you got to love the FCS. And by the way, the NFL, you can get individual player stats. You can see how Tom Brady's been doing in each of his games this season. You can see how the Bengals been doing, all the players. This really helps you for fantasy football as well, how they do in each of their games. So that's a great part of the NFL. When you get to the FCS part of the thing here, this is even better than having an FCS magazine because it's updated all season long. Now, just to give you an idea, of the 8 teams left in the playoff, number 1 in the in the average opponent game rating remains James Madison, 88.2. Now, naturally, North Dakota State's right there. North Dakota State's also having a great season. They're number 2, 86.2. And the number 4 team, right now, it's Montana. Let's go click on Montana real quick. Montana had this strange game here to Montana State that they lost. They bounced back pretty good last week, beating Southeast Louisiana 73-28. They're playing to an average game grade of 78. Big drop-off after 1 and 2. I still got to think it's going to be James Madison, North Dakota State, in the championship game. And for this week's FCS feature game, let's take a look at James Madison against Northern Iowa. Now, James Madison is a 20-point favorite. Seems like an awful lot for a playoff game, doesn't it? But this is a James Madison team that's pretty loaded this year. I really like this team. I think they have the best defense in the entire FCS. I made that statement at the start of the year, sticking with it. And right now, they're holding opponents to 109 yards per game below their season average. Guess what? Best mark in the FCS, just 276 yards per game. Now, Northern Iowa's got a good defense as well. How about number 2? Holding opponents to 99 yards below their season average. That's the second best in the FCS, just 294 yards per game. So first thing you look at, probably the under 57. You got 2 really good defenses here. But on the flip side of the coin, offensively, it's not much of a contest. James Madison is averaging 103 yards per game above what their opponents normally allow, 482 yards per game. In fact, they're in great current form. Last 4 weeks, they have averaged 526 yards per game. They are outgaining their foes by 282 yards per game. Northern Iowa, the last 4 weeks, how about 275 yards? In fact, on the season, Northern Iowa gained 63 yards per game, less than what their opponents come in averaging. That's number 102. That's not a good sign when you're taking on the best defense in the country. They got blown out by North Dakota State, a team that's like James Madison, 46-14. This year, they got revenge after losing to South Dakota State 38-7. They beat them 13-10. But this is an offense. Look at their leading rusher, Trevor Allen, 3.7 yards per carry. Will McIlvain, 2.8 yards per carry. In fact, on the season, they're averaging just 3.3 yards per carry. Going up against a James Madison D that gives up 2.3, I think it's going to be tough to run the ball. Well, that means they're going to have to pass it, right? Well, they're only hitting 54% of their passes. James Madison only allows 54%. You wonder how Northern Iowa is going to move it. And if they gain 63 yards less than what their opponents normally allow, they're only going to gain 213 yards. And if James Madison holds them to 103 below their 309, that's 206. So you're looking at only about 208 yards for Northern Iowa here. Could potentially even be a shutout. I like that factor. And as mentioned, Northern Iowa, the last 5 games, while they advanced in the playoffs, they beat San Diego and they beat South Dakota State, they are only plus 23 yards per game, James Madison is plus 282. And look how Northern Iowa does on the road. On the road, they're actually getting outscored per game by 5 points per game. Meanwhile, James Madison outscores their opponents at home 49-14, plus 209 yards per game. So last 4 weeks, and these average game grades are great. We just started them, updating them during the season this year. We updated them for last year. I love opponent or the average game grades. James Madison is playing to an average game grade is 97.1, and Northern Iowa 69.4. That's a 30.7 difference. My computer's got James Madison by 24. It's got the yards 386 to 164. I like James Madison minus the 20 over Northern Iowa this week, even though it figures to be a defensive battle. I just don't see Northern Iowa moving the football very much at all against this James Madison defense. And the beautiful thing about Phil Steele Plus, and if you don't have Phil Steele Plus, I mean, I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars making this site, so I've got all this stuff at my fingertips. You could have it at your fingertips as well, and for a fraction of the cost. Phil Steele Plus right now is for the whole season through the Super Bowl. It's normally $69. It's $44 right now. If you type in the code word winners, it's just $39. How do you sign up? Go to the philsteele.com store right here. And when you go to the store, just hit Phil Steele Plus. It's $44. When you go through it to do that, type in the code word winners, it's $39. You'll have FCS, NFL, FBS, everything at your access. You'll have college stats access for the last 40-plus years. You'll have FCS. Look at this. We give you FCS, red, color-coded green and red, all the way through the decade, back to 2011, even the stats for 2010. And we'll probably get that color-coded for you by the time next season rolls around. And right now, you can sign up for FCS only, $14. Get NFL, FBS, FCS, $39. Type in the code word winners. Just go to the Phil Steele store and pick up on that. So taking a look at this week's FCS, that is that one. And if you want to get the other three matchups and completely break them down, and once again, you can even go into here and get individual player stats on these FCS games and see how the players have been doing in each game all season. You can see that Trevor Allen did have 90 yards rushing last week against South Dakota State. What did he have in the first game? 3 for 18. So that was a big difference. Was the running attack. They ran the ball better against South Dakota State than they did in the first matchup. But that's all at your fingertips for the NFL, the FCS, and the FBS. A couple notes for you. While I was looking at the bowl games, I like to come up with some interesting things for you. We'll take a look at these team pages for the FBS now. Take a look at the Florida-Virginia matchup. And the one thing I wanted to point out here, I'm adding up just the yards rushing by the running backs. There are teams that have got over 2,000 yards rushing for the running backs. Some are near 3,000 yards rushing for the running backs. But when I looked at this Florida-Virginia matchup, let's go ahead and click on Virginia. The running backs, look at this. Their leading rusher is a quarterback. Talapapa, Keir, Hollins, they don't even add up to 1,000 yards for the running backs. And same thing for Florida. 539, 271. Emory Jones, quarterback, 101. So overall, Florida not 1,000 yards for the running backs. Unusual to have two teams below 1,000 yards for the running backs. Another thing to look at, Georgia Southern, and probably not as concerned about this stat, but I was just the thing that jumps out at you. I love the color-coded red and green, as you see. Look at this, 17.6% sacks. They've only allowed 24 sacks all year, but they've only thrown the ball 136 times. Now, I looked to see if that was bad. Guess what? Same thing last year, 16.2% sacks. That was 19. 15.9% sacks. So the fact they're an option team and they take sacks and they're not credited with a lot of pass attempts really adds to that. But that one jumped out at me because most of the teams that I was looking at were definitely below 10% on the percentage sacks. And speaking of percentage sacks allowed, let's take a look at an interesting thing I was looking at with Washington State and Air Force. Washington State's allowed 18 sacks this year. Air Force has allowed 4 sacks this year. So which offensive line has done a better job with sack percentage? Guess what? It's Washington State. Washington State's thrown the ball 668 times, been sacked 18. That's 2.7%, which is why I put this number here. Very important. Look at this. Air Force has only allowed 4 sacks all year. Guess what? They've only thrown it 114 times. That's 3.5%. Washington State actually allows less sacks per attempt than does Air Force, even though it's 18-4. So make sure you do look at this number as well as this number. Don't just look at the pure sacks. Look at the percentage. That's very important when it comes to the games. And I found that intriguing because if you allowed 18 sacks on the year, their team allowed 4. Naturally, they've got the better sack percentage. Not so fast, 2.7 to 3.5%. Another thing is, coming into the playoff, everybody is knocking Oklahoma's defense. Oklahoma doesn't have a defense. Blah, 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 blah. Look at how they've done the last 4 weeks. They're giving up 278 yards per game. They are actually holding their opponents to 170 yards per game below their season average. Look at those numbers, and look at the season. They've held their opponents to 96 yards below their season average. That is number 11 in the country. That is not a weak defense. Get that out of your head. Yeah, they did give up 426 and 477, but look at the amount of red numbers here for Oklahoma. 1, 2, 3, 4 red numbers on the defense. Everybody watched that Texas game. They gave up 27 points. They only gave up 305 yards. And if you look at, let's take a look at LSU, for example. See how many red numbers they have on the defense. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 red numbers on the defense. So Oklahoma's playing much better defense than what you would think. Please get that narrative out of your head that Oklahoma doesn't have a defense. They're a Big 12 team. Look at this number. Holding their opponents 96 yards per game below their season average. Number 11 in the country. That's impressive. Remember that rant I got on at Clemson after the North Carolina game where people were saying Clemson's not a very good team. Clemson's really struggling. And I pointed out they had one bad game all year. Once again, I'll bring it up one more time just because it really has proven true to form. Clemson's blown everybody out. They've gone 10-2 against the spread this year in FBS games. Do you see any red numbers on this Clemson page? Even in the North Carolina game, they don't have a single red number on the entire page. Everything is green. A team that averages 6.5 yards per carry, hits 66% completions, allows 3.0 YPC rush, 50% completions. They've got 37 sacks. They've only allowed 13. They're number 1 in the country on defense, holding opponents to 164 below their season average of 125. And even up here, when everybody said they were struggling, no, they weren't. They were playing. They blew out Georgia Tech. A&M scored a touchdown. If you click here, A&M scored a touchdown with 6 seconds left in the game. Got 91 yards, 16 plays, called a bunch of timeouts, scored with basically no time left in the game, or else that one's 24-3. They blew out Syracuse, the team that tormented them last year. Last year's great Clemson team only beat Syracuse 27-23. This year's team beat them 41-6. They blew out Charlotte, played 110 players. I'm not quite sure where all that narrative was, but Clemson has not struggled all season. They've struggled in one game this season. All right, enough of that. Let's take a look at strength of wins. I do have an FBS game for you. There is an FBS game this week. I've got something for you on that. I do want to remind you that on the when you go to the homepage here for philsteele.com, click on the NFL. You can click on this strength of wins, pain of losses, which I like to look at each week. San Francisco, 63-5. You get credit for every team you lose to. You get credit for all their losses. They've only got a 5 there. The team with the most wins is Baltimore, 72. San Francisco, 63. Seattle, 62. And this gives you credit for every win of an opponent that you beat. So that tells you who the teams at the top and the bottom are. And still, surprising to me is this one in the NFL. Go to the NFL info and go to offense and defense YPG average. Dallas Cowboys remain up here, and I said that's got to be a typo. Dallas is really struggling this year. How can they be 91.6 yards per game above their season average? And then I click on the NFL team pages right here, and I go to the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm surprised that you in your head, Dallas is struggling. Look at all these losses here in red. They have outgained every opponent this year except for one. New Orleans. They were minus 9 yards in that game. They are plus 105 yards per game this year. So they actually are doing good as far as the numbers go here. They're just not turn them into wins and losses over here. So that's an interesting thing to point out in the NFL. And all right, let's take a look at your final game this week. And we're going to take a look at the Army-Navy game. And it's one of my personal favorites. Why? It's been an automatic every year. Now, Vegas has adjusted, I'll tell you that. Normally, Vegas would have a line on this game about 48. The line's only 41 on this one. And why do I say that? Because I like the under, and here's why I like the under. Remember a couple of weeks ago in my FCS matchups, I brought up the fact that we had two option teams going against each other, Wofford and Kennesaw State. We got an easy winner with the under in that game. And I mentioned that the beauty of an option team, and the reason you run the option is your opponent can't prepare for the option. They don't have anybody that runs the option at the same speed you do. You only have 1 week to prepare for it. There's cut blocking. You're not used to taking on the option. And that's why teams run the option. That's why Georgia Tech had success with Paul Johnson, because teams couldn't prepare for it. Maybe after they did prepare for it for so many years, it caught up to Paul Johnson at Georgia Tech, but hasn't caught up to the service academies, and it's a great equalizer for them. But when a service academy plays a service academy, guess what? They play the option all the time. They're used to it, so you don't have those advantages, and it tends to be a low-scoring game. Air Force Army this year, 17-13. But let's take a look at the series history. And since this is a Phil Steele Plus tour, the first thing you can do is click on the opponent. So we're going to click on the Army-Navy matchup. You can see that Navy dominated this series. They won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 in a row. Army's won the last 3. Interesting to point out that wins are by 7, 1, 4, 4, 7. This one was 27, 4, 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In the last 8 years, 7 of them have been decided by a touchdown or less. They get you thinking underdog here with Army, because it's a rivalry game. You take the rivalry dog, and here it's showing there's not a lot of blowout wins the last 8 years, the last 7. And once again, when you're using these last 22 years matchups, the red and green here indicates the actual winner of the game, which makes it easy. You don't even have to look at the score. You don't even have to think. You just see all this red, you know Army lost those games. You see this green, you know they won them. The color over here indicates whether they covered or not. And this means that Army has actually covered 1, 2, 3, 4 of the last 5, 6 of the last 8 games. You could see that at a glance going down the line. You could also see who's been the favorite and who's been the dog. Now look at that. As a favorite, they did not win. As a dog, they won. 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 So the last 6 years or 5 years, the underdog is 5-0 against the spread. That's at your fingertips every game all season long. Not just Army-Navy, but if you wanted to click on Army Air Force, there's your complete breakdown. You can see Army losing a bunch of games. They've won the last 2 heading into this year. It's all there at your fingertips. You just click on the opponent, and it shows up. Now, the other thing we're going to look at is the last 40 years' results. And I mentioned to you the under. Now, here's something remarkable. Let's go back to 2018. 17-10, the game went under. As you know, we on the last 40 years stats, they started putting up totals regularly in 2003 finally. So we started logging them here in the logs. So you got totals back to 2003. You've got half times back to 2004, which I find valuable as well. Someone asked me, is there any trends to the Army-Navy game at halftime? Well, if you had Phil Steele Plus, you wouldn't even have to ask me that question. Just go there. You see last year was 7-0 at the half. Here's 10-7 at the half, 24-7 at the half, 17-14 at the half, 7-7. It's all right there. You can tell what the halftime scores were. But let's go back to looking at the totals here. Once again, Army-Navy, 17-10, under. That's 1. Army-Navy, 14-13, under 44. This is a final score, 21-17, under 47. That's 3 straight unders. Army-Navy, under 51. Army-Navy, under 56. That is 5 straight unders. Army-Navy, under 69. 6 straight unders. 56. As you can tell, Vegas is smartening it up. They used to put the total at 56, 69. We were going under by 20, 30 points. I mean, it was so easy back then. They didn't really catch on to the concept of option versus option and the fact it's Army-Navy. But anyway, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight unders. 8 straight unders. 9 straight unders. 10 straight unders, 11 straight unders, 13 straight unders, 14 straight unders. This one went over. 14 straight years this game has gone under the total. Now, once again, it used to be super easy with totals of 56, 56, 69, 56, Super easy. And that's what the computer says. The computer says there should be a lot of points in the game, but it's Army-Navy. It's option versus option. And that's why 14 straight years it's gone under. You know what? One of these years, this game's going to go over. And I'm going to actually lose this play. But when you play on a streak, you win many times. And guess what? You're going to lose once. So you just got to keep riding it. So for the 15th straight year, I'm going to take the under in Army-Navy. And hopefully we got our 15th straight winner in this one. We're going to go under Army-Navy. And even though my computer says it should be higher scoring, it's Army, it's Navy, it's a rivalry game. We're going to go with under as the selection there. And once again, you've got the last 40-plus years results for every team. This takes you back in Army. You want to know what the line and spread in a game was in 1976? It's at your fingertips. You don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars compiling the information like I did. You get it right now with the Phil Steele Plus. Just sign up. And the beautiful thing is, oh, by the way, when you do sign up to Inside the Press Box right now, I want to mention this because it's about Phil Steele Plus as well. If you get my bowl edition, I mean, I've got a complete checklist. I've spent the entire week going over every single game, breaking down the checklist. I've got the checklist on every game. You'll have my breakdown on every game. You'll get every bowl or every playoff game. It's $89, $79 with the code. Just go to InsideThePressBox.com or even PhilSteele.com and type in the code word STEEL19. You'll get the postseason, all 40 bowl games, all 4 weeks of playoffs, $89, $79 with the code, and you get Phil Steele Plus for free. That's why I bring it up right now. Get Phil Steele Plus for free with Inside the Press Box. Sign up for the postseason right now. Get your Phil Steele Plus for free. Well, that'll do it. Now, I'll be back next Friday. I'll have some bowls up for you next week. I've been breaking them down all week. I'll have bowl games up for you next week. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button and send this one out. And I'll keep these things free each and every week during the year. Appreciate you taking the Phil Steele Plus tour, and let's hope we have another huge winning week this week.